Hello everyone, we're about to get started. My name is Patterson. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Arizona, and I have just returned from Antarctica, where I spent 2 winters. You're looking at a photograph of Antarctica at the South Pole, where the sun is just starting to set. The sun sets for about 6 months, and it doesn't come back up again for about 6 months, and then it rises for 6 months. So essentially there's 2 days in Antarctica over the year, very long. I just want to check my watch to see how long I have to talk. There we go. Okay, so Phil, would you advance to the next screen and then move the little finger button to the middle of the screen with the mouse. There you go.
Okay.
But don't click on it yet. I just want to set this up. Before going into detail about Antarctica, I kind of wanted to see if I couldn't show you a piece of it. So, welcome to Antarctica. Go ahead and click it, please, Phil.
This is the entryway to our dorm. Normally this has carpet on the ground and the walls are just normally walls, you know. But we're going to open the door right now. It's a little bit like opening up the door to another world. Are you ready? It's a little bit blowy out there right now.
So that footage was taken while I was at the South Pole, or excuse me, at McMurdo, and what she was showing you was what's called condition 1. That's a weather condition, and when it's announced, whatever building you are at, you stay in it, or as long as the storm rages. And then they'll announce either condition 2 or 3, which means you can exit. Condition 1 is, or condition 3 is the best that you can hope for in Antarctica, or the safest. But condition 1 is where you buckle down and hide in whatever building you're in. This is the new Adams and Scott South Pole Station, and it's where I did my 2nd winter at South Pole, and it's also where the food growth chamber is, and that will be the topic mostly of what I talk about today. So, Phil, would you advance the slide?
Yeah.
This is the South Pole Food Growth Chamber as it's embedded inside of the station. And you can see the hallway. It goes all the way back. And this is a composite photo. I took a number of photos and spliced them together. It's one of the volunteers that helped me out inside the chamber. And this is one of the crew members just relaxing inside. Advance the photo, please. And this is what you would see if you were relaxing inside of the South Pole Food Growth Chamber. Now there are short crops off to the side, your lettuce and herbs. And then in the middle we've got tall crops, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, etc. It's a sealed environment, 53 cubic meters. And it's sealed by these doors. So when those doors are closed, all the materials that the plant needs are provided to them inside that sealed environment. There's about 380 liter nutrient tanks, hydroponic tanks underneath, which feed each of the 3 different systems. This is system 1, system 2, and system 3. Next slide, please. So what is the South Pole Food Growth Chamber really? It is a automated growing machine, a bit of a cybernetic technology in that it activates based on plant needs. And here's the computer that does that. It is an Argus computer. Select, go ahead and select the forward. Yeah, there we go. And then these are the nutrients that we actually inject into the system. Next slide, please. Here's how they are injected. These are peristaltic pumps. And when the plants need more nutrient, that's how the nutrient concentrate gets delivered. Next slide, please. There's carbon dioxide enhancement, that is to say we enrich, or enrichment, we enrich the CO2 environment inside the chamber so that the plants well, so that CO2, carbon dioxide, is not a limiting factor. Next slide, please. We have control of the light cycle. These are all 1,000 watt high pressure sodium lamps that are water cooled. This was a technology developed by Phil Sadler. He's the fellow advancing the slides for us, and it was done for NASA, which is where we got our start on the South Pole Food Growth Chamber and how it might apply or relate to space applications. Next slide, please. And then lastly, humidity and temperature control. We can do that both on-site or remotely, but the chamber does that automatically. And so those are the basic elements. Next slide, please. I'm going to quickly go through this slide. What this is there's about 4 that are very similar. This is the South Pole Food Growth Chamber's nutrient control sensors. There are about 43 sensors in all. They control the chamber, but they're electrical conductivity sensors, there are pH sensors, there's flow sensors, and then there are temperature sensors that all relate to nutrient control for the plants. Next slide, please. The South Pole Food Growth Chamber's atmospheric control is done by a few less sensors, just a temperature sensor, a relative humidity sensor, and then the carbon dioxide sensor, which tells the chamber when to inject carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Next slide, please. And then there's the temperature control. These are all temperature sensors, but they also activate the HVAC, or the air conditioning, our climate control. It's done with cold and hot glycol. They're provided to us on the base. Next slide, please. These are the sensors that are associated with the lamp control, and that the water-cooled lamps need water. Deionized water or distilled water to flow past and cool that environment. The idea is a lot of light is being given to these plants, and in addition to that, a lot of heat. And the water-cooled technology carries away that heat and allows you to grow plants very close to bulk light. You can actually touch one of those high-pressure sodium lamps at 1,000 watts and it not be hot at all. If you tried that with a high-pressure sodium lamp that wasn't water-cooled, you do damage to your skin. Next slide, please. Again. Another slide, please. Okay, so these are all the sensors that allow us to grow what we do there at the South Pole, and there's, I think, 43 of them. Is that correct? I can't see that number.
42.
But most of them are temperature sensors. A few of them are flow sensors. A few are pH sensors. Electrical conductivity sensors, pressure sensors, CO2 sensors, light sensors, and then lastly, relative humidity sensors. Those are all the sensors we need to grow what we do in that harsh environment. Next, please. Okay, so that's what it does. It provides fresh vegetables to people who are isolated in that harsh environment for 6 months. If they didn't have this type of technology growing their fresh vegetables, then they would be eating vegetables out of a can or frozen vegetables. Next slide, please. And there they are. This was the crew I spent my winter with in 2006. And you can see that they are a bit in awe, some of them. What we're looking at is the sunrise for the first time in 6 months. So it's a big day. We're all a bit awake now, a lot more awake than we were just a few days prior. And this is the galley, and you can see that the dress is I mean, you live where you work. We do 10-hour days, 6 days a week, and people come up in full Antarctic weather gear, or they come up dressed in their pajamas. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like after I've harvested. I do weekly harvests, or I did weekly harvests there at the South Pole. And you can see that there's a lot of debris on the floor. And the reason for that is I'm doing a leaf harvest on these lettuce plants. A leaf harvest increases output, at least according to my initial numbers, by 1/3. And so rather than doing an entire head harvest, I did leaf harvests. But there's quite a bit of cleanup afterwards. Notice the smile on my face doing all that cleanup. I'm smiling because I think that I had the best job in Antarctica compared to what other people were doing for their jobs. It's an extremely painful place to work in if you're outside. Next slide, please. that's what a harvest looks like. These are all, this is lettuce, cucumbers, peppers, tomatoes. I don't know what that is, and I think this is basil. And over here is the food waste. These are materials that were harvested that aren't going to be sent up to the galley. Ultimately, those will be flown back to the United States, and these will be consumed. Next slide. Okay, so to give you a taste of what harvest looks like, would you select the middle of the screen, Phil? This is some time-lapse photography of a harvest, and I'm coming in, and I'm doing my leaf harvest of lettuce. And you can see I leave very little of the plant. It's not a lot, and yet in a week it'll fully recover, and I'll be able to do another harvest just like that. So also notice the sliding out drawers with the plants in them. That allows us for efficient use of the chamber. While I'm in there walking around and cleaning, I can push the plants out of the way. But then after I'm done, and we wait for the floor to dry, I can come back in, pull back out, and voila, we're done with our harvest. That was about 4 hours, reduced to just, I think, 40 seconds. Please, next slide. And this is what the middle of the winter looks like there at Pole. Beautiful auroras. This is the midwinter greetings card that we send back to the United States, letting everybody know that we're all safe and sound. And this is the crew, most of them anyway, who could show up for the photograph on that day. Here I am. This is the station manager, Liesel, and the rest are all colleagues. The demographics in terms of gender, about, what was it? I think there were 12 women, the rest male. Next slide. During that same time, I wanted to give everyone here an experience of the difference between where I work and where other people work in Antarctica over the same year. This is what it looks like outside. That's the moon, why we're all here today. And this is just one of the windows of the South Pole station. So you can tell it's very dark on some days, it's very bright on others, depending on the aurora or whether the moon is shining or not. But that gives you a sense of the difference between my job and other jobs. Next slide. This is a communication that I sent around to my crew members in that I just finished the lounge, and in addition to feeding the crew with fresh vegetables, we've got a place where they can come and check their email, or phone home, or just relax, read a book, talk to each other, enjoy bright light and high humidity. Humidity is right in the single digits on the station. So your skin cracks, your lips crack, it's really bad. And we only get 2 showers a week, and those showers last for 2 minutes apiece. So think about that. Next slide, please. This is another communication I sent around. I'll just read the last part. So if you've been holding back on seconds or firsts at the salad bowl, go ahead and dig in. There's plenty more. Next slide. The reason I sent around that communication is because of the mentality of the people there at Pole. It's a very close-knit community, scientific community. We all share everything. That includes the bad smells, as well as just the shortage of shower water. And in this case, people were not taking large portions of lettuce so that other people could have a little bit of lettuce. But we were starting to throw fresh lettuce out. That's a week old, and it was a lot of lettuce. So I had to tell people to, dig in, and they did. And from that point forward, we didn't have any more excess. Next slide. And it's all about keeping these people happy. And there we are, all being happy. This is a long and skinny party in the old dome. I'll show you that in a bit. It's been it's under the process of being demolished or it is disassembled and returned to the States. And it's been there for a number of years. It was built in the 50s. So the long and skinny party, my crew, smiling. I thought I'd share it. Next slide, please. Speaking of sharing, this couch that you see here was inside of the growth chambers environmental room where people come in to enjoy that space. So one day, one of the crew members showed me that there was white crawling mice on the pillow, and I was pretty freaked out about that, and took a sample, ran it up to the clinic, and the doc and I took photographs of it and could not identify what it was. But what we could do was make sure that it wasn't something dangerous or parasitic to the crew. So we made sure it wasn't lice or other forms of creepy crawlies that people get. That night, I took the photograph. When the satellite came up, I jumped on Google and started doing image searches for mites. And lo and behold, bingo, I got a match. I couldn't tell whether it was the species that comes from Europe or from the United States. But what I could do is definitely identify it as a dust mite. And dust mites, we're sharing them right now. I'm sure some of us somewhere in the room have one or two either in our luggage or certainly in our beds. So dust mites are very common. And the reason they got so prolific in this couch was because that was one of the places on station where humidity was high. They love high humidity. And so we got lots of them. The solution was integrated pest management. That's an agricultural term where we use as little pesticides as possible. Well, it sounds polite to have as many pesticides. So I just took the couch and set it out on the balcony for a week. We haven't had a problem since. There were quite a few people that actually sat in that seat while it was there, but not for too long. Again, being outside in Antarctica is uncomfortable. It certainly was for me. Next slide, please. Sunrise after 6 months. That's what it first looks like, and it takes days to come up. This is something that you can actually look at on the horizon. As it continues to progress upward, it's harder and harder to look at without eye protection. That is the first glimpse, and it's quite a big deal after 6 months. I can tell you that working in that kind of environment, I felt groggy most of the time. I just couldn't wake up completely, even though I worked in the brightest place you could in the dark there at the South Pole. When the sun finally came up, and you could stand at a window or outside and look at it directly, there was an awakening that occurs that it's difficult to describe. You've been asleep for 6 months in such a way that you can't describe until you experience what sunrise is like. And then there's this refreshing, this quickening, this exhilaration that comes from it. And from that day forward, I seem to be far more awake than I was during the previous month. Next slide, please. Well, once the sun comes up, we can expect planes to start landing and turnover to begin, people to arrive and people to leave. So this was a time of me saying goodbye to a lot of close friends and hello to sunlight, soon hello to the United States. Next slide, please. These are the folks that relieved me. This is Jennifer Nelvin. She relieved me at McMurdo Station my first year. And we got a hero shot, as it were, at the South Pole. A University of Arizona student. She's graduated now, working in New York for a company called Sunworks. And then Brent Salazar, who relieved me finally there at Pole when I was done in 2006. And notice that this student, Brent Salazar, has all kinds of things attached to him, and he's wearing a vest. Well, living in a scientific community, you can be expected to contribute to other people's science. That's one of the ways in which we share there. And this is him on the first morning. I woke him up nice and early, and he's got a bright smile on his face. I think he only got 2 hours of sleep. The point being is that he adapted very well to the thin air there at Pole. And that's, we fly a lot of people home. They'll do their physical checks, their mental checks, they'll pass everything, they'll fly to Pole, they'll start doing their job, and a day later, boom, they're back on the jet going home because they just couldn't adapt to the thin air. Next slide, please. This was an experiment I conducted, a final experiment. I wanted to see if I could lift the entire planet above my head. Worked out pretty good. Next slide, please. This is my plane out of Antarctica, and mixed emotions on that day, if I can tell you. Lots of hugging, lots of goodbyes happening right here, and then when they say go, we run out to the planes, dodge the propellers, we're in and off we go. We don't like the planes to sit very long on the ice. There's problems with all kinds of stuff getting too cold, and then the plane gets stuck, and and so do we. Next slide. Well, I returned after a few days in the sky. That's how long it takes to get to the pole in a number of planes. And I returned to the Controlled Environment Agriculture Center there at the University of Arizona. This is where I currently work as a student. And what I don't have is a picture of all the students that I spoke with at the pole. These are all cards to me after speaking with a group of about 60 fifth graders. It was awesome. And I never got to see them, but they got to see me over the internet. As soon as I get a photograph from my professor, Dr. Giacomelli, I'm going to add it to the slides. We can see both sides of the conversation. Next slide, please. At this point, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and tell you about how my research, or how my work at South Pole actually relates to my schooling as a master's student at the University of Arizona. I think, as we all know, NASA plans to put a solar-powered moon base on the moon in the very near future. And this is one of two areas that make a lot of sense, in that the rotational axis, this being the south pole of the moon, is a primary spot to put a solar-powered life support system. Next slide, please. And to get your mind around it a little bit, this is how I think as an engineer. I took a photograph from the Clementine mission and darkened every bit of it except the portion that is bathed in light most of the time by the sun due to its interesting and well, its interesting orbit. So if there's light there most of the time, that's a spot to put up your PVCs, your photovoltaic cells, as well as your light concentrating technology to run your plants for both feeding the crew and supplying them with oxygen or refreshing their air. So that's the way to think about the problem. The next thing to ask is, where on earth might humans practice being on the moon? And there's lots of places on here to practice being on the moon. But I think there's a lot of good reasons to go to the South Pole to do it. Next slide, please. Which is where the photograph was actually taken. This is the dome I was talking about, where the long and skinny firing took place. And these are the reasons why I think going to the pole for a lunar analog is a good idea. We'll go through it. It's extremely cold, really, really cold. When I was there, it got down to negative 108 degrees Fahrenheit. The lowest on record, I think, is negative 118 degrees Fahrenheit. Regolith, lunar dirt, is something that you're going to have to pile on top of any moon base because of micrometeor impact, dangerous radiation coming from the sun, as well as charged particles due to the solar wind. So burying your life support system under regolith is a good idea, and it turns out that regolith under 1/6 gravity is approximately equal to the same forces such a system would experience buried underneath snow at Earth's gravity. So there's a good reason to go to the pole. The next reason is that there's good evidence to indicate that beneath 1 meter of regolith, you can look for about negative 30 degrees Celsius constantly throughout the year. And negative 30 degrees Celsius is something we experience all the time at the pole. So that's a comparable temperature. Granted, the surface of the moon gets a lot hotter and a lot colder, but underneath the regolith, it's fairly constant. So there's another reason. Continuous light during the summer. The sun just circles and circles and circles and circles all day long, every day until it sets. And then who knows where it goes through winter. But it certainly doesn't come back for quite a long time. Self-contained scientific community during the winter. We are completely self-contained. No flights in or out. You're stuck there. And that's the reason for all the rigorous testing, physical, mental, etc. There's a clinic at an airport, so if we do get into trouble, we can be seen there right on site, or you could be back at a hospital somewhere in civilization inside of about 10 hours, assuming that we can make all the connections necessary. So the last reason I think it's good to go to the South Pole for a lunar analog is there's no polar bears. Polar bears, I mean, really, they're something that one would have to worry about that we don't there on that continent. Next slide. Okay, so ecological life support systems and how they related to my work at the pole. For an ecological life support system, at minimum, one is going to need to cycle at least 16 elements that comprise most of life. Blue whales, bacteria, human beings. Oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen make up the most mass that gets cycled through a living system. Oxygen in the form of H2O, right, water, and CO2, and diatomic oxygen, that's stuff that we breathe. And then carbon in the form of CO2 and the carbon that makes up plants. And then lastly, hydrogen in the form of H2O. These make up 90% of us as living things, or communities, living communities. So the point is, we cycle what comprises most of life, 90%, and that's oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and the rest we take in hydroponic form with us, about 10% of what you need. So the question becomes, how long can we stay based on such a notion? And how big does it have to be on such a notion? And how much is contributed to what you can eat, and how much is contributed to how much air that can be refreshed in your biological life support system using this technology. Next slide, please. Thanks, Bill. I've still got 5 minutes on the talk, I think, and that's all I need. So this next slide shows some of the experiences that we have had at the University of Arizona. This is an inflatable greenhouse built by Phil Sadler, and these are all tomato plants growing on what's called cable culture. This next figure is the South Pole biological life support system model that was developed based on the work I did at Pole. And the elements are oxygen coming off the plants, CO2 being breathed out by the human inside of this sealed chamber, a blower that cycles the air and goes past a cold condensate coil, condensating the water that comes out of the air. Air gets heated back up and then right back to the greenhouse. So the model that was developed based on the South Pole work says something like this. This is what we think we're learning, what we think our work is telling us. And that is to say, 0.3 kilograms of hydroponic nutrient dry salt will buy you as a human being 0.83 kilograms of oxygen. It'll cycle that much for you, and that's how much you need every day to breathe. It'll cycle, based on this model, about 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide through your system, which is what you breathe out as a waste product. And then lastly, look at this, 137 kilograms of water. The take-home lesson here today is that of all the materials that a biological life support system cycles through it, water is by far your most massive. So those are your numbers that give us an idea of how much it takes to support one human one day based on the South Pole food growth chamber. The figure below it is what I'm working on for my master's thesis. And that is to say, we remove the humans, there's no human in there, and we connect what's called a thermophilic composter. We throw in material to be composted. As it gets composted, it generates carbon dioxide, liberates carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide is then fed to the plants, which use that and liberate oxygen, which is then fed back to the composter. So once we can balance these two systems, a decomposer community with a producer community, then we can we'll have our sizes and we'll have our numbers such that we can introduce the notion of how much it would take to put a human in that same space and how much bigger the composter might have to be. Next slide, please. Would you click in the middle of the screen, Bill?
Yeah.
So you're looking inside of a thermophilic composter, again built by Bill Sadler. There you go. And this is what it's doing. It is composting bran flakes that you buy at the store. So it's a first approximation. And bingo. Lots of CO2. I can tell you his initial numbers. Lots of CO2 was produced, well above 2,000 parts per million at a 13 cubic meter per hour flow rate. So next slide, please.
Nothing's happening.
Forward button.
Yeah, I'm doing it. Nothing, Lane.
Nothing?
Uh-uh.
Okay, let's see what I can do.
Time's up.
You're right. Well, my last slide is after this one, and I'll just go ahead and finish up with the lab. What you don't see is where this composter is actually located. It's located in the lab there at the University of Arizona, and Phil is going to show you what the lab currently looks like, along with the lunar analog that's being built, such that that composter and the greenhouse, the inflatable greenhouse that's currently under construction, will be used for balancing all those materials and reducing uncertainty with regard to what it takes to build a biological life support system. So with that, I'll thank you for your attention and end it there and ask for questions if there's time. Thank you.
For your composter, are you supplying microbes to that?
Understood. The question is, for the composter, do we add our own inoculant or our own community of microbes, so that, or do we just wait for them to arrive? And the answer is we inoculate. For this experiment here, I went to a compost pile. I dug as deep as I could, found the warmest spot. It smelled really good, really earthy. Threw in about, I think it was 100 milliliters worth of that material, and inside of a day, carbon dioxide was pouring out of that system. You in the back.
About years ago, I tried to make the difference of the plant growth due to the gravitation. 12 of the strawberries grow upside up. The other 12 upside down. The result is trying to see how the gravitational force affects on the growth of the plant. The result, the upside down would not bear any fruit. The right side up grow real well. After I found out the reason, it's because I used a mirror to reflect the light because it's upside down. And that lack of the ultraviolet to stimulate room. So that's my result. I wonder, is there any way I can improve this research to see will the strawberry grow bigger if it's upside down due to the gravitational effect on the nutrient path?
I understand your question. If we grow plants upside down, will gravity assist us in producing more massive fruit? I certainly don't know. The only advice I would offer is that you make your light source on the ground rather than reflecting it from top with a mirror. In that way, there's no confusion to the plant as to which direction that limiting factor, sunlight, is. So that if I understood you correctly, that's what I would offer as a next step. Thanks for the question. I understand. So I'm being cut off now. Thanks again for the attention, and I'll hand it over to Peter.
Thanks, Lane. It's an incredible effort, and we look for much more progress. And maybe you could experiment in one section with plants upside down.